and welcome to something a little off the beaten path called Heroes, Myths, and Legends in Art Making. And this was put together by my friend Dawn and I. So this is where art and social studies intersect. Would you say that's correct, Dawn?
I would absolutely say that's correct. So my name's Don Powell. I'm with RCOE. I'm an arts enthusiast and a social studies administrator, and that's Louisa Higgins, history enthusiast and arts administrator here at RCOE. So we're really excited to be with you today. This collaboration came as a part of another collaboration where we were just talking about different things and riffing off each other, and we got really excited about this. So yeah, we're just going to dive right into it, right?
Yep, we are. Okay, so this next little section, the first thing I want to do is, we love to come up with a catchy name, and Dawn and I are good thought partners, and we were talking about heroes, myths, and legends. And so first we're going to go ahead and define that. So a hero, I put up Superman here, but a hero is basically someone who's supposed to have, great capacities, courage, strength, celebrated for the stuff that they did, and kind of just overall favored in life. Okay, so that is one definition. The next one is myth. So it's something popular that's been associated to a person or an institution or something that happened and typically upholds a cultural ideal. And then finally, we have legend, which is a little bit different because it's an unverified story that's handed down. Again, it's popular, believed to be historical. So we started talking around that notion. What's a hero? What's a myth? What's a legend? And, when you look at them all that way, you can see that there's possibly some intersection between the terms, but there's also some differences. And we just wanted to kind of have a little bit of a clearer understanding as we go along. And so as Dawn and I alternate talking about the history and then talking about the arts around these figures, we're going to invite you to think about that. What is a hero, a myth, or a legend, and how do these people that we're going to share with you stack up? So here's our first person. Take it away, Dawn.
Sorry about that. So Johnny Appleseed, on take two, we'll get it right. Johnny Appleseed is our first person that we're going to talk about as a possible hero, myth, or legend. If you can go on down, there we go. So these are some questions you might want to think about. Three things that you can recall. If you've got one, you can drop it into the chat. If you want to come off mute real quick because we've got a small crowd. You don't have. We're not going to spend too much time with this, but definitely wanted to throw it out there as a question. If you can recall anything about Johnny Appleseed, does he have any virtues? Was he real? Did he exist? Did he not exist? Anybody know?
It's a quiet group.
Yes, it is.
Continue, sir. And please admire the art on the slides as we go along, because this is art that features somebody that we've, or as we go along, each person that we're going to talk about, I went looking for the art about them that exists to this day. And Bev says she doesn't know anything about him, so she's about to find out.
You're about to find out all kinds of stuff about Johnny Appleseed. So Johnny Appleseed, believe it or not, Dennis Johnson, thank you for chiming in, was a real life person. He really did exist. But that's okay. I thank you for playing. You win the only participatory trophy of the day, so congrats. But Johnny Appleseed was a real life person who was born, and his name when he was born was John Chapman. He lived in 1774 to 1785, and he is actually really famous for walking around the countryside and planting apple seeds. Now, some caveats to a lot of that. The reason why Johnny Appleseed was doing that is because he took advantage of the government that was giving away land that wasn't theirs to give, but that's a different story for a different time, where Johnny Appleseed actually had to go around and plant trees in terms of homesteading, and he had to plant a crop that would take more than 7 years to come to fruition in order for him to get the land that he was walking on. So apple trees were within that span, and what he could do is he would walk up and down and plant them, and then they would grow. And so now he's got all of this land, and so then he would sell it to people who were moving out west, and then he would move further out west, plant more trees. So he did that for many, many years, and his apples are not the kind, tasty, juicy, delicious apples that we all loved as children, but are hard cider apples that were ripe for boozing, the kind of stuff you need in order to survive a hard night on the frontier, right? So that's the more of the reality as opposed to the myth behind Johnny.
Right.
I think I hit all of that.
Yeah, you did. And so, each of those slides featured artwork of him, much of it done at the time, and we cited some of the locations. And now here's a couple of the other artworks that you can find. So and I'm just, when I play something for him, I'm just do like a minute of it. So this is the Johnny Appleseed song. And I will tell you that having taught second and third grade many years, I taught about Johnny Appleseed, and I didn't know nearly as much as I do now after working with Don on this project. So here's our little song.
The Lord is good to me, and so I thank the Lord for giving me the things I need, the sun and rain and an apple seed. Yes, He's been good to me. I owe the Lord so much for everything I see. I'm certain if it weren't for Him, there'd be no apples on this limb. He's been good to me.
Okay, so that's a depiction of Johnny Appleseed in film.
Oh, here am I.
His own little song. And then when I was looking around, I saw a lot of poetry happening. Okay, a poetry happening around Johnny Appleseed. And I think maybe I even did that when I was teaching with a little art project. And then I even found this online, the Johnny Appleseed Square Dance Club. So these folks are
Holidays promenade, walking around the ring. Get back, smell the wind, everybody swing. Join your hands, circle left, go around the ring. Well, and weave the ring. When the roll's got together, I'll be there in the roll.
And I'm probably dating myself in saying that we learned square dance when I was in school, and I certainly saw that about Johnny Appleseed as well. So what do you notice as we are showing you these works of art, film, music, poetry? Are they realistic, or are they idealizing Johnny Appleseed? Do they evoke nostalgia for you? Like I said, I kind of grew up and even in my early professional career was teaching this, and I remember learning about him as a child. And is it possible that a young country needed emerging, folk heroes? So that's just a few questions to ponder as we go along. And here comes the next one.
So Paul Bunyan, is he a myth, hero, or legend? Come on. Dennis, I'm going to accept your answer from the last time, and congratulations, you were correct. Paul Bunyan was not a real live human being. So, anybody know anything, remember hearing about him, or is this guy also not too great with us? I'm not seeing any nods, no, nothing. All right. So, nobody have any experience with Paul? No. Oh, Paul, what do you got?
Well, when I was visiting my relatives in Minneapolis, and we drove up to Duluth and beyond, up to Brainerd, there was a huge Paul Bunyan statue, probably about 30 feet, 40 feet tall, and with Babe the Blue Ox right next to him. And so I know some of his history or legend comes from that area, maybe?
It most certainly does. He was a massive frontiersman who, he would clear trees with his bare hands. Just pick them up right up out of the ground. And you can see in this beautiful depiction right here. Bev saw a statue and Blue when she was small. That's awesome. And there's new statues now. Yeah, there are. And it's not because you're old, Bev. It's because people like making statues. So, so he started as this oral tradition among Canadian loggers and the U.S. loggers. They were working together, and I'm not even going to try to say
it's Quebecois Bunyan, which I think is just hysterical for Bunyan.
Yeah,
Bunyan, it's a surprise.
You're like, whoa! So he gets popularized by a pamphlet in 1916 by, of all things, a logging company. So, I mean, he's really the first like Kool-Aid man of his time, or marketing tool. I'm trying to think of what's popular right now, but I'm not as hip as I used to once be. But he's that guy. So he logged in North Dakota and South Dakota, which is now logless because he was so dang good. He had Babe the Blue Ox, and it was all about tourism and getting people to come in and see these great and amazing places and to come and stay. So, and then of course, Paul needed a woman, so we've got Paulina Bunyan right there. It's an image of her, and I believe that's actually a statue of her, right?
Yes, like, it is.
Yeah. And then that brawny paper towel guy, does he look familiar to you? I don't know. I think he looks like Paul.
I think he's based on.
Right.
So moving into the artworks around Paul Bunyan, once again, we have some films. So this is a classic cartoon, and I'll show you about a minute of this.
Mighty Paul Bunyan, he lived long ago. His strength and his goodness helped America grow.
When Paul Bunyan was just 1 month old, he placed his baby hands around a young maple tree and tore it out of the ground, roots and all. When he was only 18, he was already 25 feet tall and weighed 800 pounds, all bone and muscle.
So you get the idea. Nifty little cartoon featuring Paul Bunyan. And then he also has a song. Here's some music. We'll watch this little snippet.
With my double-blade axe and my hobnail boots, I go where the timber's tall. When there's work to be done, don't mess around, just sing right out for Paul.
Hey, Paul.
I'm coming, boys.
Paul Bunyan, he's 63, axe handles high, with his feet on the ground and his head in the sky. Hey, Paul, Paul Bunyan. Well, he picked up his axe and he chopped a tree clean down with his forward swing. Got him another when his axe swung back, that timber cutting king. He kept on a-chopping the livelong day, and then when it was night, he walked back over the stumps he'd cut and stomped them out of sight. Thanks, Paul.
What? Nothing.
Paul Bunyan.
Okay. Well, that makes clear how he was so effective at the logging, based on that.
With my double-blade.
And I found even more music when I was digging around that was about Paul Bunyan, The Cold Wind Blew. So again, what do you wonder? And we're, noticing and we're wondering things. Why do you suppose that idea of Paul Bunyan became so popular? And what beliefs about America or Americans did it serve? Did his story serve? And could there have been a comparable female version? We just found that one statue, Paulina Bunyan, but there was no story developed around that. I think that was an artist's rendition. And why not? Why was it just Paul himself? So that is our second person of interest that we were looking into in creating this presentation. And on to our third.
All right. So we're going to talk about Davy Crockett. Davy Crockett, myth, hero, legend, real? Anybody? No? I think Dennis was typing something into the chat, but I'm not sure. Did it make it?
No,
No.
nothing yet.
So while you think about that, did Fess Parker play Davy Crockett? Did have an association with the Alamo? And what do you recall about his appearance? Liliana has never heard of him. Dennis says he's real. Paul, real or not real? Just give us a thumbs up, thumbs down. I like the Karina, the shrug of the shoulders. Not really sure. Not real. Okay.
All will be revealed.
Yep. So, truly some of the greatest contradictions is this guy right here, Davy Crockett. Davy Crockett, probably the best way to describe him is complicated. So he was an indentured servant as a child. He also ran away from home. Before becoming a politician, he made his career as like a bear hunter. And then actually at one point he fought in the Creek War early on, and is responsible, at least partially, for some of the Creek massacre that takes place during that war. But then vehemently opposes Andrew Jackson and Indian removal. So the Trail of Tears that takes place in the 1800s that Andrew Jackson famously makes happen in defiance of the Supreme Court. Davy Crockett was opposed to that, and he was opposed to Andrew Jackson in such a way. Oh, I forgot to mention this. Davy Crockett goes on to become a politician, gets elected to Congress, and because he's so opposed to Andrew Jackson, actually gets voted out of Congress because of it. And the even crazier thing is even though he hates Andrew Jackson and all the things that he stands for, he even winds up saving his life from an assassination attempt. And then gets thrown out of Congress again and says, you know what? I'm out of here. I'm going to Texas. Y'all can, he literally is quoted as saying, y'all can go to HE double hockey sticks. I'm going to Texas. And so he goes to Texas and he shows up and he's there for literally 3 months before he gets embroiled into the revolution there, and then finds himself up at the Alamo, where he is either, where everybody winds up, who is there winds up being murdered either in the Alamo itself or just outside, around questions and stuff around that. And then, yeah. So a really complicated guy. He did wear the coonskin cap. That has made its way into all of the images you've seen and everything else that Luis is going to share with you. So,
right, there's the little piece about that's an art piece around at the battle at the Alamo, right? Yep. So let's see what I have dug up in the arts around him. And so here we go again. We've got a little clip of film about Davy Crockett.
There's a reason for that, Paul.
King of the Wild Frontier.
So they sent him off to Washington town with his best dress suit, still his buckskin's brown, a living legend of growing renown. Davy Crockett, the canebrake congressman.
Just a minute, Your Honor. Hiya, Davy. You old bushwhacker, I wondered when you were going to show up.
Bar rustler, you. How are you?
Hey, I put up with your singing them lies about me, but printing them for everybody to read's going too far.
Well, they helped put you here, didn't they?
Yeah, and now I got to live up to them. Do you think I'm going to dress like any self-respecting congressman? No. I got to go in there like the king of the wild frontier, thanks to you.
Well, Davy, that's downright ungrateful. Here I come all the way from the old by the river just to wish you luck on your maiden speech.
Well, you just get yourself up there in the gallery. You're going to hear a real gutty one.
Okay, so there is a bit of film.
I'm David Crockett, fresh from the backwoods.
Okay, and then he also has music devoted to him, Davy Crockett's song.
Born on a mountaintop in Tennessee, green estate in the land of the free, raised in the woods so's he knew every tree, killed him a bar when he was only 3. Davy Crockett, king of the wild frontier. Fought single-handed through the Injun War, till the creeks was whipped and peace was in store. And while he was handling this risky chore, made himself a legend forevermore. Davy.
Okay, there's our Crockett music. And you might have noticed as we're going along that Disney has really gotten in on these three depictions. So they've did film around each of them: Johnny Appleseed, Davy Crockett, Paul Bunyan, and up at the top, and I do remember that one, that top one, Legends, where they put all three of them together into a cartoon presentation. So again, as we're looking at all of these, what stands out, are certain things about these three disproportionately represented so that they stand out like a caricature, caricature being exaggerated features. And now that you've learned a little something about Davy Crockett, would you think about him a little bit differently? And is it confusing to think of him and Daniel Boone? And again, dating myself growing up in the 70s, we talked about both of them in those days, not so much now. But as it turns out, so they both were these tall guys in the buckskin clothes and all that, but they're two different people, and you can see their information there. But they were both portrayed by Fess Parker, who's an actor. So that's what makes it even more confusing. He was literally, I guess, the only actor that really had that look down.
And so I'm going to drop a link in the chat here in a second to a See Wonder Think activity that we did at an EL symposium, because we've been talking about all this different art. We've been talking about looking at different things and wondering and thinking. And so I just think it's a great way to incorporate art within our history social sciences. If you're not already doing that, it's awesome. It's a great activity to use. So that link will be coming here in a second. I was trying to queue it up and I didn't get it that time. I apologize for that.
Is it in the hyperdoc at the end, Don?
Oh, I think it is actually.
Okay. Okay. So stay tuned. It's coming.
Yep.
Okay.
I forgot about that.
Okay.
All right. And then.
So then we started thinking, where are the ladies, Don?
Yes, we did. I was just making sure that was going to be me. So
That's
we
you.
talked. Yep. We talked about all these men, right? Where'd all the women go? What's going on? And so the first person we wanted to talk about is Julia Addington. And she is this awesome lady who basically wins a public election and may have been the first woman elected to public office in the entire United States. And she wins public office in a state where she cannot vote. So like Jeanette Rankin gets elected to Congress and is the first woman to be elected to Congress. But women could vote in that state where she was from, Montana. Women could not vote in Iowa. And in fact, she won, or actually when she got elected, it was a tie. And she and the guy who was already humiliated that he tied to a woman of all things, was like, no, you can have it. And the woman said, no. Julia was like, we will do what you do in the event of a tie. And that back in the day was flip a coin. And she won the coin toss. So there you go. And then, of course, Abigail Adams, who is the wife of John Adams, and quite honestly is probably the better half of that too, in terms of intelligence and wit and guile, and has her famous Remember the Ladies piece when she was writing to John as a founder of this country. So she's a stud. Speaking of studs, Dr. Mary Walker is a phenomenal woman. She is the only woman to have won the Congressional Medal of Honor. She was a surgeon in the Civil War. She comes down, reports to the, well, actually, there's a lot of stories here. I think I'm going to stick with that one. So there is a ton of stuff about her. Just so you know, she's probably like one of the most fascinating, cool people of all times. So she refused to take the extra vow of obey that women have in their vows as opposed to men. Found out that her husband cheated on her and decided she was going to get a divorce. Now, we're not talking in the early 1900s. We're talking mid 1800s when that was virtually impossible. It took her 9 years, but she got one. And so maybe it's a good thing she didn't take that vow. She goes and she becomes a doctor. She's the second practicing doctor in the entire country because there was only one school that was allowing doctors. And she also wears the pants. She hated dresses. She hated the long formal coats and all of the like making these hilarious hand gestures because, you know, There's like 500 clothing items that women had to wear. And she was like, it's crazy. Like, this does not help and is not helpful or useful. And so she wore pants and was actually arrested for wearing her own clothes, because you can get in trouble for things like that back in the day. She wins the Congressional Medal of Honor for her heroism in war. She basically goes down to the Civil War, starts to fight, not to start the fight, to serve, and gets turned away. No, we don't want you. And so she decides she's going to stay behind and continue to work. And she continues that work, continues to ask to be petitioned, continues to get denied, finally says, you know what, I'm not doing so much staying way in the back. I need to be up where the action is, and is credited for saving hundreds, if not thousands of lives and limbs in the war, because the policy around amputation was so bad that they were just cutting off limbs left and right, and more people were dying from the amputations than they were from the wounds. And Mary went around and saved a lot of lives from her consultations with that. And then eventually, because of her work along the front lines, actually gets a what's the word? Where she's actually placed in the military. She finally gets her enlistment that she
commission.
Yeah, she gets her commission. She gets enlisted into the military, and then is almost immediately captured by the South and is forced to spend time in a grueling POW camp, and is actually one of the named people in a famed exchange between the North and South for prisoner exchange. Unfortunately, her short time there left her in a state where she could no longer practice medicine on the field of battle. But she received a Congressional Medal of Honor, to this day, the only woman to do so, and had her Medal of Honor rescinded in 1917. And she defiantly refused to send it back and wore it every day of her life until she died. I believe she's buried with it, and it was restored to her in, I believe, in the 1970s. It's almost 60 years later.
Yeah, and she's wearing it in this depiction here. Yeah,
absolutely.
And not only were we looking for where are the women portrayed in history, you know, we saw so much work done around those three gentlemen that we introduced you to, and we also started asking each other, well, what about people of color? Really interesting stories and heroes, myths, and legends in that arena. And so we started to look into Bridget Biddy Mason.
Are you guys, throw a hand in the air if you're familiar with Biddy Mason.
Okay. So, and we were especially fond and excited about featuring her because she's an educator and she's from our area. So she came into San Bernardino, California, and spent 5 years as a slave in the Inland Empire before she sued for her freedom. And after her freedom, or after gaining her freedom, she moved into Los Angeles, where she was a very respected nurse. So then she saved her earnings and showed her savvy for real estate and invested multiple properties, and was a well-known philanthropist in the area. She was extremely successful despite never learning how to read or write. So we were excited to bring this to her. And again, when I'm looking for the art, I'm looking for art depictions of the different people that we're talking about in this presentation. This other person of color that Dawn, I believe, Dawn, you pointed this out to me, or you made me familiar with Henry Box Brown. And you can see, let me move our little boxers so you can read this. So he was an enslaved person, and he got the idea that he was going to injure himself or create an injury, and then literally mail himself as dry goods to get into the free state. So it's an actual true story. And he would go on to become a noted abolitionist in the North and in Europe. And because his heroics were well publicized in the South, it forced the North to pass fugitive slave laws that allowed Southerners to go into free territories to hunt down people that had escaped enslavement. And not wanting to chance that happening to him, he went off to Europe. And there is this beautiful children's book called Henry's Freedom Box by Ellen Levine. And that's one of the next children's literature and art books that we're going to tackle and have a close read, and then also a story that goes along with Henry's remarkable life. And then we have Elizabeth Thorne Scott Flood. It's interesting rendering. It's kind of looks like a Warhol style. And let me move this picture up so it's out of the way. And again, to honor educators. And so, you know, she wanted her son to get into a Sacramento school. And because she couldn't get him into the public school that she wanted to, she decided to open her own school and establish the first private school for African-American children in that city. And I believe Don says in the state, that is his note there. So eventually in 1855, she got that the district to allow her school that she founded into the public system. And it's important to note, though, that that was a name only, because the school district only allocated money for white students and therefore received no funding. In order to keep the school's doors open, students paid $1 a week to attend. So there was no stopping Elizabeth. And this is the picture that started us down this path in the beginning. Don, you want to talk about this?
Yeah, so this is a very famous painting in U.S. history. I don't know how much we talk about it in our arts classes, but this is John Gass' American Progress. It's like this massive, I think it's in oil. I'm not super
Probably.
Yeah. And as you can see, it's actually a little cut off. That's, oh man.
It is a little cut off. Sorry about that.
That's okay. There's this amazing, like, you see this crazy depiction about what's going on here. So if you take a look, what do we see?
An angel leading the way.
Yeah. She's leading away and she's carrying what looks to be some kind of wire, like she's stringing some wires. So she's bringing the new technology.
Oh, I didn't notice that, the telephone poles. Okay.
Yeah, so we got the telephone pole, or the telephone telegraph. We've got the wagons moving out west. Everybody's coming out. We've got the settlers, the frontiersmen, and then what you can't see down in the lower left-hand corner are in much darker shades are the Native Americans who are being pushed off the land. So when we look at these kinds of paintings, and when we look at any story or conversation in U.S. history, or in history in general, it's really important that we ask ourselves some questions, and that's who is speaking, why are they speaking, and what voices are going unheard, and why. So another way of looking at that, what is being presented, how is it being presented, and what's the bias? Because there's a bias in everything, you know? I have a bias in soda. You have a bias in, you know, so bias doesn't necessarily, like, we just have an affinity for one thing over the other. You know, you say Coke or Pepsi and people are going to get up in arms. Some people are like revolted and disgusted at the idea that, you know, Pepsi's like a real soda.
It's not. It's not.
See what I mean?
But I'm aware of my bias. So.
Right? And
Yes,
and so, yeah. And so we know that bias exists, and that everything we hear, see, has that bias in this. And so we want to be aware of that so that we can make those educated decisions about what information that we have in front of us, right? So we got some definitions down here about propaganda and American artifacts and how they all contribute to the greatness that is the United States. And I'm not trying to say that the United States isn't great. There's some amazing things that go on in this country. And there's some amazing things that have gone on in this country as a result of women, as a result of men. But America is not a linear tale. It is a very non-linear tale, and we have starts, false starts, setbacks, and then huge explosions of growth that are messy, but ultimately it is hopefully a tale of progress that is still not finished, and I think that's important.
And on this slide, I pulled up two art pieces that are done in the propaganda style of trying to influence both, I believe, both around the World War II era.
Yep.
Uncle Sam, and of course the very famous We Can Do It, which has been very much adopted by the feminist movement. As an empowering piece of art. Whoops, let me fast forward. It looks like that has been done with fruits and vegetables, kind of in the style of like Vic Muniz, you know, where you create something. Yeah, if I'm looking at her hair, it looks like the top of an eggplant. That's kind of interesting. So anyway, that is a couple art pieces that I brought into the presentation. And in thinking about this, and this is besides looking at that painting of Manifest Destiny, and that's not the title of it. I don't recall what it is off the top of my head, Don. Maybe you
American
do.
Progress.
American Progress, right. But usually, art is made to preserve and elevate. So we're documenting things, we're elevating, we're preserving things through the arts. What gets our attention, and makes it into an art piece, it must be important. That's the assumption that we can make as the audience. And so we want to be mindful in our respective fields, myself in the arts, Dawn in social studies, about casting a wide net with an eye towards inclusion. So you see, we started out with these three really famous gentlemen. Well, two of them were gentlemen, one was a made-up character, and then we moved forward. Where are the women in the story? Where are the people of color, so that we have a more complete picture? And that's just a matter of thoughtful research and planning on our parts as teachers. And so we had a lot of fun with that. And Dawn was kind enough to, and I don't know if you can grab that, Gracie or Lily, and put that into the chat. That's the HyperDoc that has links to the research that we did in preparing for you today. And so at this point, we went through this pretty quickly. This is just a short kind of mini lecture. And at this point, we're happy to take any questions or comments that you might have. I'm going to stop share. And now I can actually see the chat. So if you don't have any questions, we gladly appreciate your time for being with us, and we'll hang out a little bit if you have some questions or commentary that you'd like to share with Dawn and I. Thanks, everybody.